Good morning. This is Clarence again from Trosho Law Office, PC here in New York City. This is part 5 of our series. I don't know when and how to start. It's been 2 weeks since the last time we posted something like this, but so many things happen. So let me just go through the things that we're supposed to discuss today, which I think many people have been asking about. Number one, people who are lawful permanent residents who were stranded back home in their home countries, people who have been visiting in the US under a tourist visa or other non-immigrant visa and have been likewise stranded in the United States. And thirdly, the most important one, I guess the most recent one, was the increase of the USCIS fees schedule and how it may affect a good number of people. So let me go straight to the point. Green card holders who went home and who for some reason were stranded back in their home countries because of COVID-19 are asking what will happen now once they return to the country. Well, the general rule is that if you're a green card holder and you travel abroad, you're supposed to stay not more than 180 days outside of the US. Otherwise, you will be deemed to have abandoned your lawful permanent residence in the United States. Now, that's a rebuttable presumption, of course, but you have to understand that even though you're a green card holder, once you return to the country, you are technically asking for admission again into the United States. And that means that the officer at the point of entry or at the airport has the authority, discretion even, to determine whether you actually have abandoned your lawful permanent residence here in the US. Now, the practical side is this. Number one, at the airport, do not be scared or worried because this has been happening a lot lately. You will be subjected to secondary inspection wherein they will separate you from the line and ask you various questions. Obviously, why you stayed outside, where do you live, what do you do in the US, to determine whether you actually are residing permanently here. And they will go through your history. Now, obviously, you could tell them that you've been stranded back home and there's a reason you could not come back, which in most cases is true. But at the same time, unfortunately, the officer at the airport may schedule you for another visit with them again sometime a couple of days or weeks ahead to determine further what to do with you. In fact, some of them right there and then could actually deem you to have abandoned your lawful permanent residence in the US and refer you to the immigration judge for revocation or rescission of your green card, so to speak. Now, that's going to be a long story, so I just wanted to be aware of that. So therefore, it's very important for you, before I forget, in one or a few cases, the officer even asked a little, like an elderly green card holder to actually fill out a form, submit it to immigration, and she later realized that it's actually a voluntary renunciation of her residency in the US. So just be aware of that. When that happens, consult a lawyer. I just like to repeat again, this is not a legal advice, and you really need to consult a lawyer, especially that each one has his own travel history peculiar to him. In any case, what will happen is what you're supposed to do is establish that you have been actually residing in the United States. One of them obviously is that you have been paying taxes or filing taxes, bank accounts, any other things that will establish your residency here to make it easy for you. Now, if you will be referred to the court, that's a different story, but you could use the same documentation for that purpose. Now, once you're in, please understand that the COVID-19 pandemic that we have could be prolonged, so that if you were to travel again out of necessity, please file a re-entry permit before you leave the country again, so that you have that option, or if not, you could stay outside the United States more than 6 months, and once you come back, you will not be deemed to have abandoned your residency here. Now, please understand that this will affect also your eligibility for naturalization down the road. That's a completely different matter, but be aware of that if you stay more than 180 days in one calendar year, for example, you might not meet the minimum residency requirement for the purpose of naturalization. That's a different matter altogether, but just I'll stick first to what we discussed about people who have been stranded outside the United States, the green card holders. Now, vice versa, there are people who, this is number two topic now for the day, people who came here as a tourist. Normally, they're given 6 months to stay here, and their stay, duration of stay or authorized stay is about to expire. And also some other people, for example, who are under other non-immigrant visas like J1, their status is about to expire also. So please consult your school if you're a J1, whether they're willing to extend your J1 status. If you're coming here as a tourist or any other non-immigrant visa, if you could extend that particular status, do so before the actual expiration of 6 months or the stay authorized or given to you upon your entry at the airport. Now, another option, if you're a non-immigrant visa, let me backtrack a little. Tourists, you could extend your stay here. Okay. If you're under other non-immigrant visa, for example, a J visa, then it could not be extended before the expiration. You could apply for a change of status, preferably to a tourist or visitor or B1, B2 visa. So again, consult a lawyer because there are requirements for that. Personal circumstances attendant to you only. But bear in mind, whenever you make such a request, extension or change of status, you still have to comply the minimum requirement that USCIS officers are supposed to look at. For example, your source of sustenance or maintenance while you're in the United States, the reason why you're extending your stay here. Probably it's difficult for you to go back to your own country, or probably it's impossible for you to have a flyover, a stopover somewhere. I don't know what part of the world you're from. Most of our clients are from all over the world, so please consult a lawyer as to that also. Now, regarding these things that you're supposed to do, the third subject that we have now is the scheduled increase of the USCIS filing fees. As of August 3, there was a publication in the Federal Register that effectively increased across the board approximately 20% of all USCIS fees for all applications. Now, for some, it could be higher. So I'll give you an example. For example, PQTNR visas, the fees will increase by roughly 50%. H1 visas by 50% also. For naturalization application, if you want to apply for your citizenship, effectively it increases by 80%. All of these fees will be increased by October 2. I don't think there's an extension of this schedule. Now, please understand also that for some application for green card here in the United States, for example, if you look at the numbers, there's a decrease by 10%. But be aware that right now, if you apply for your adjustment application, that also includes effectively your application for work permit and for travel document. That's covered by the initial application. Now, with the new schedule, what will happen is that's true, there's a decrease of $10 for your adjustment application, but now you have to file and pay separately your application for work permit, for which there was an increase of around 20-30%, and the travel document, for which there's another increase. So effectively, there's a very substantial increase of the fees that you have to deal with. Now, why is this so? I'll give you an insight as to what's happening with the service. They're saying there's a projected shortfall of around $1.2 billion. Otherwise, by August 31, 13,000 employees of the USCIS, DHS will be furloughed. But even then, hopefully it will not happen. We're talking about actual people and their respective families here. Let's say it will not happen, but still this projected increase will push through. Why? Because number one, every 2 years, the service is supposed to have a review of its expenses and income. Number two, the USCIS is supposed to be self-sufficiently funded by the people applying for certain benefits with it. Now, what causes then this problem of shortfall? Well, some people have analyzed it. Number one, it has been effectively brought about by the change of policy by the present administration. Number one, for example, there are requirements where people have been applying for employment base. They're supposed to be interviewed and their respective families also. There are like 166,000 of them. People applying for asylee and their dependents, they're supposed to be interviewed also. People who have prior H1 non-immigrant visas have been approved before. There was a policy before, there's a prior deference policy, meaning if you've been approved initially, you're doing the same work, the same employer and income, then it would have been expedited if they will give you a deference as to your prior approval. But apparently this is not the case. So that means therefore that more people and officers are being required to do these actual interviews for everyone that I just mentioned. Now there were also people, for example, initially married who got their green cards already, and then removal conditions with all proper documentation before it could be given deference, it could have been approved, especially if you have children. But now still they require them to show up for an interview, and that takes time for everybody. Also, the usual applications, the credentials have been accredited already, but there are additional RFEs, requests for additional evidence. And in fact, there were applications that have been filed initially, and there were certain boxes that were inadvertently missed out. They were bounced back. And although those boxes, some of those boxes in the applications don't really pertain to that particular application, but still they require them to fill it out as not applicable. That's number one. Number two, if they would require the interview anyway from experience, they could actually fill it out from the applicants themselves. But still they bounce it back, and you need people to process those applications. So what happened was that the whole process has been complicated, scrutinized, and unnecessarily prolonged. That would account for more time, more officers, more resources, obviously. That's the problem that they have cited also. Now, the irony is that even before the increase of the schedule, there was a pattern and practice under this new administration also, wherein people were given the option to expedite their processing process, in which they have to pay extra dollars for that, which most people did anyway, because there was a delay already. So there's no such thing as a regular process effectively. So people opt for an additional expedited processing and fees. And those fees actually amounted to around $1.2 billion, but still there's a shortfall as to that. So I'm not a politician, I'm not a bureaucrat, I'm just telling you what's going on. Now, as a side issue, people have to know that right now, as of last week, so many things happening, but what I could share you now is that as of last week, USCIS actually terminated the contract of the subcontractors. You have to understand that the production of green cards and work permits are actually subcontracted to subcontractors. They terminated the contract, and what they're saying, regular employees will now be doing this type of work, correct? So these people have to be trained. You also have to understand that with the COVID-19, there's a skeletal force actually doing the work. So less people will be doing more work, and with that number of people, they will still be doing, moving forward, more work. So what does that mean? That means effectively, any layman could tell you the whole process would be, as I said, complicated, harder, and even prolonged. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, that's the situation we're in. Now, I have a bad example in mind, but it's the only example I could think of. If you were an Apple iPhone Pro Max customer, and you're going to the Apple store and you make the order, the Apple store will tell you that your iPhone, there's no guarantee that it could be delivered. Number one, the delivery could be prolonged. Number three, the maintenance and the support system that they have might not be up to par with your expectation. And on top of that, you'll be charged more, right? And on top of that, if they will find out that your application has been denied, there might be an additional penalty for you. I'm talking about penalties like being referred to the court, your application for marriage, genuine or not, could be denied and will be referred to the court. So many things could happen. So at some point, the customer would say, what's in it for me? That's a bad example, but that's how the real market works. I'm saying that because the USCIS is supposed to be a service-oriented department previously, and it's supposed to be funded by the applications. Now, if you were to rely on the income from your customers, there has to be a corresponding efficiency as to the service. But it's not happening right now. It has not been happening for the past 3 years. I don't know how to rectify that, but market forces, free market would tell you that it's not sustainable. So at some point, if this will go on, some people might be discouraged from doing so, one way or the other, no matter how desirable an Apple iPhone is. And before I forget, there are some applications actually that are, for example, asylum. They're now required to pay for it. And also, the other penalty that I'm talking about is this is a subject for another series, is the public charge initiative that the government has tried to implement. Supposedly, there's a wealth means-based requirement for you to become a green card holder. It's a whole series of regulations, but this one would require a lot of review by an officer, and failing to meet that standard could end up with your application being denied and you being referred to the court, because obviously you don't have any status anymore. And obviously once you are in court, there are so many issues involved, whether you actually have the means, whether your family actually could support you, whether you're actually disqualified, and it's a whole complicated process. So as you could see, I'm not trying to make it complicated as it is. I'm just giving an idea that if you're dealing with a complicated entanglement like a Gordian knot, people need to spend time how to untangle it. You're not just Alexander the Great who could just slash through it and everything will be good and forgotten. Anyway, those are the issues. I'm sorry I have not been in touch with you for the past 2 weeks. Someone in the family passed away, so I have to pay my respects. Anyhow, I hope you're at home, you're safe, but if you have to stay home and you have to go and work, please stay safe. All right, thank you.